You can call it a ceasefire. You might call it a deal. You might even refer to it as smart diplomacy. But definitely consider this. When the United States cuts a 60-day agreement with Iran, reopens the Strait of Hormuz, keeps troops in the region, and Israel's not even at the table, that's not just foreign policy. That's a sovereignty question. Who decides when American power gets used? Who decides when it stops? And when an ally's war aims collide with America's national interests, do we even admit that there is a difference? This isn't just about Iran, Israel, or even Donald Trump. It's about whether America still controls its own foreign policy and what becomes of the U.S. Israeli relationship. And here to suss it out, in some ways, part two of last week's episode, none other than my friend, co host, Mr. Mike Termont. Mike, how are you today?
The best 60 seconds of many of my weeks is listening to you set up these shows. I really should. I think I've said this like 8 shows in a row now.
You flatter me with this every
I really should get you to tell me in advance so I don't go all, googly-eyed when you do it. I was afraid you weren't going to tie it so strongly to Israel. I think we're done with the show, John. I think you just nailed it. You summed it. We will, we'll tease it out. We'll spend 20 minutes at each little piece, but you have, as you so often do, summarized it absolutely perfectly. It is a sovereignty question, and I would go even one step in greater detail. Within each country, who decides? Not only does the United States have to take back the independence of its foreign policy, and by the way, and I've said this for a long time, I believe the Israeli population wants to take back its foreign policy too. I don't know that most Israelis want their foreign policy to be either hijacked by the United States and President Trump and the administration, or by Benjamin Netanyahu's extremely conservative and expansionistic right-wing government. And I think that whichever side of that debate you're on in Israel, you've got a reason to be pissed off. And I do believe in the long run, the Israelis will move to limit the extent to which they're tied at the hip to the United States. I think most Israelis would be glad to give up the several $1 billion of foreign aid. Mossad being so legendary, right, so good at what they do, I wouldn't be surprised if most Israelis would be happy to give up on the relationship between Mossad and the CIA, right, for example.
Right.
And I think that is about to be laid bare in the Knesset with Netanyahu in an understandably tough situation, right? He's being told by the White House he's going to have to sit down and shut up and behave himself, and they want him out of Lebanon, and they're going to compromise, and he'll stay in Lebanon but stop fighting. That's what the compromise is going to be. He's going to have a lot of people in the Knesset who are mad at him, who say he's kowtowing to President Trump. So everybody's in a tough political situation right now.
Yeah, and the politics only get more and more complicated the more you suss things out. But let's start out with something that made the news over the weekend. And obviously that's the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding between Iran and the U.S. for the 60-day ceasefire framework that President Trump has announced.
Yeah,
this has been confirmed now through a third party.
As an outline.
As an outline, yes. That's
no one has seen the secret language, right? Apparently the text is like the old joke about the joke that's so funny no one can see the whole thing at once because it would be too dangerous, right?
Monty Python strip.
Exactly. So no one is allowed to see the entirety of this deal. Some people have seen pieces, but no one has seen the whole thing.
One person saw 2 sentences and they're in a coma type of thing.
Yes. Right, from laughing too hard.
Well, what's interesting here. Let me just lay out what we do know, or what some folks seems to be the consensus around it. Then we'll talk about it politically from both the U.S. and the Iranian angle. So, and this is
the U.S., Iranian, Gulf states, Lebanon, Israeli angle.
There you go. You got them all, Mike. Okay. So this is as of about a couple of hours before we sat down to do this episode. Uh, the 60-day ceasefire framework ends active hostilities, reopens the Strait of Hormuz, and sets up follow-on nuclear talks. Several core details are either disputed or not fully published. So that's the disclaimer I read off there. And what's reported in this MOU for this MOU to include rather is a 60-day cessation of military operations, with the deal framed as an end to the war and a pause afterwards for negotiations.
Yep, all was good.
Yep, the immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and lifting of the U.S. naval blockade with the goal
All was good. Yeah,
of normal shipping.
yeah, good stuff.
Nuclear negotiations over Iran's enrichment program and stockpile of highly enriched uranium during the 60-day window. Iran's pledge never to acquire nuclear weapons with possible enhanced inspections or monitoring of nuclear material.
Yep.
Sanctions relief and some form of access to frozen Iranian assets, the timing and sequencing of which are being contested or disputed. And then the possible inclusion of Lebanon in the ceasefire language, though that point is specifically disputed by Israeli officials, therefore remains murky. So, Mike.
And all of that is simply to negotiate.
Exactly.
Beyond the first 2 points, right? The Strait of Hormuz will open, we'll stop shooting at each other. Yeah. Everything else is subject to negotiation.
Exactly, and they are scheduled to meet on June 19th.
This is really a negotiation over negotiating, right? This is a deal to say, all right, I will talk to you if you just don't shoot me for 2 months.
Right. And I'm going to play the cynic here, not because I enjoy doing it, but because it's my nature, Mike.
And because you'd be right in this case.
Okay. We've heard similar proclamations from President Trump before, not just in the Iran war, but in other hostilities that he likes to take claim for bringing to an end, various hotspots.
And in other negotiations.
We're
always hearing, the trade war is going to be over in 2 weeks, or the operation to round up illegal immigrants, that's going to be wrapped up in 2 weeks. Everything is, we're going to wrap this up in 2 weeks. I think we're on our fourth 2-weeker regarding this deal, which I guess finally, don't count your chickens, but it does look like it's going to be signed.
So, Mike, I'm going to give you my cynic's opinion on it, and I want you to disavow me of my cynicism.
Okay.
I think that this ceasefire announcement is nothing more than President Trump's attempt to knock down the price of oil, thereby giving new Fed chief Kevin Warsh the opportunity to say that headline inflation is overrated. Consumer spending came in sort of a little bit below expectation. Therefore, if we take away the systemic inflation caused by the choke point, by the war over the Strait of Hormuz, that way, we've already seen oil prices plummeted, right, on this news. So convince me that I'm not a cynic for saying President Trump is simply and only interested in knocking down interest rates to preserve whatever financial shenanigans he's got going on between himself, Besant. He's trying to convince Kevin Warsh, someone who is not prone to lowering rates in this case. He's trying to convince him that, hey, you need to lower rates because I've got the inflation thing under control. The war is over, as far as you know. Oil is back under control. There is no inflation, despite that 4.2.
I get all that. I don't. First of all, I think you've actually given the administration, not just the president, too much credit.
Oh, okay.
I doubt their thinking has gone that many layers in.
Well, Besant is a Soros.
Besant, sure. But I really doubt the president is turning to Scott over Iranian policy. Maybe once in a while, they bump into each other at a luncheon, but I don't think that the president is taking a whole lot of advice from a whole lot of people and connecting a whole lot of dots here. I think you're right. I wouldn't consider it cynicism, though. I think that's as much as for which we can hope. That would be the high water mark in the development of strategy regarding the Strait of Hormuz. I think the president absolutely wants it open and lickety split, and because of inflation. and not merely as a monetary phenomenon, but because it is making it more complex and more expensive to operate in the world and for the world to access energy. And in a lot of places like Iowa farms, but all over the United States and all over the world, is a tough situation the president has gotten himself into and gotten us into. And I think he just wants out. I
Yeah.
think he just wants out. I
You know,
don't think you need to connect all of those dots that you just connected in a very sophisticated fashion.
I'm
He
sorry.
just wants out.
I got you. And you know what's interesting? You mentioned the farms in Iowa. And I was not aware of this. I admit to being fairly ignorant of this point until a couple of days ago when I was looking into my conspiracy of why the war was, why we had the 60-day memorandum announced. Um, Fertilizer is going through the roof in terms of cost for farmers,
Yeah.
contributing to the inflationary pressure we see for consumer spending, right, on food, groceries, and things like that.
Yeah.
And up until now, I've been saying, of course, it costs more to transport food. You have all those
Yeah,
costs.
understand. And Iowa's a unique spot. Iowa, everything is spread out far apart. So the fact that the gas is $4.50 a gallon really hurts. When you live on the Upper East Side, like my daughter does, and the price of gas goes up, you read about it, right?
Yes, she's on the subway. She don't care about gas.
Right. In Iowa, you read about it at the pump twice a week.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's number one difference. Number two difference is, yes, you're getting hammered on fertilizer costs.
Why is that, Mike? I found that out this week.
Because fertilizer is extremely energy intensive. Well, traditionally has been. The over the past couple of decades, technologies have gone in a certain direction because energy was cheap. And so the most cost-effective means of processing fertilizer have been energy intensive. Had we known it was going to be $4.50 a gallon and $110 a barrel for oil, different technologies would have been pursued, but that hasn't been the case.
Well, also, I didn't realize this, but urea and natural gas are key components of
Yeah.
industrial fertilization.
Yes.
I didn't realize this. Something like 20% of the world's supply of those elements for industrial fertilization come through the Strait of Hormuz. I
Yes.
was unaware of that until this weekend. That's
Yeah, the natural gas and the oil, all
Yeah.
of that. But here's politically speaking, set the technology aside for just a moment, as fascinating as it is.
done.
The Iowa farmers were already pissed off
Yes.
because of the trade war with China
Yes.
caused China to retaliate and throttle its acquisition on the open market for agricultural products,
Right.
including those from the United States. So Iowa has been getting hammered through transportation costs, not only them getting around, but getting their product around. The cost basis for their product, as you point out, through fertilizer, and their international market, which is, wait for it, most of their market,
Right.
right,
Right.
has been ripped up by the White House trade wars. So, yeah, Trump has got to resolve this lickety split, or else something will happen that he really cares about, which is losing control of the House of Representatives. That would be bad.
Yes.
That would be bad. And none of us want Democrats to come to power. I shouldn't say none of us. I don't want Democrats coming to power in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. So I share the president's interest there. But he has got to bring, if he's going to have any shot at hanging on to the House at all, and at this point, the window is closing. But if he has any shot at all, he has to bring this to a resolution, at the very least, in a fashion that will get prices down. So even if he has to admit, well, not admit, but even if he has to sign a deal that's not better than President Obama's JCPOA, that doesn't do a very good job of bringing closure to the Iranian regime's access to nuclear weapons or their willingness to do it, even if he doesn't get a very good deal on the Iranians funding their violent proxies in the Middle East, right? Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, right? Even if he doesn't get a deal there, even if he doesn't get a deal anywhere else, even if he has to give them access to their money, the 24 billion that's now under sanction, and allow them to sell all the oil that they want, even if he has to greenlight the $300 billion investment fund coming from the private sector and mostly from Gulf states. Even if he caves on every one of those issues,
Right.
if he gets the Strait of Hormuz open, we could be in a worse situation than we were 6 months ago, but so much better a situation than we're in now, that the price of oil does come down and he's got a shot. I don't believe a very good one, but he's got a shot at hanging on to the House of Representatives. That's the math here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is going to have to depend on the spin coming out of the White House because, look, I don't need to preach to a Reagan era economist, an Austrian economist like yourself, but whatever damage we're going to see in terms of inflation has already been kicked off. Just because if the war were to end tonight, hopefully, like we're all for the hostility and the death ending, but if it were to end right now, for sure, you still have to run through the damage, the inflationary pressure and the damage has to work its way through the system. It's not like,
and that could be a year.
It could be a year, it could be 6 months if you're lucky. So
6 months if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, it's 6
and
months.
18 if you're not.
Exactly. And and if you look at similar points in history, 1973, 2008, where there were oil crises,
yep,
the inflationary pressure from those events, from the point they ended, went anywhere from 8 months to a year and a half. And
it takes a long time. But if costs are going in the right direction, it gives the Republicans a talking point in October.
Well, that's what I meant by the White House. If you were to end it right now, the White House could at least try to spin its way out of it. And
to your point, you'd have to have Scott Bessent working really hard and really well.
Yeah, and you'd need Warsh on board. You'd need the best of those guys being put forward for the American public.
Yeah.
And Mike, to that extent, do you think this will lead? Because I have to sit here and say, what was this war about? Like, we're talking about, as you said, we're negotiating for the ability to negotiate over the next 2 months, right? That's all this is. It's a negotiation to negotiate.
And the point of the negotiation is to get us, first of all, back to where we were a few months ago.
Right.
And then hopefully back all the way to where we were with the JCPOA.
Right.
Then get us back there's 2 bites of the apple that we may not get, but if we're getting a third bite of the apple, we want to get all the way to what he said were the objectives. And he's articulated, at least, I mean, it changes from day to day, but
right.
We've heard 3 different issues, right? One was making sure they never have a nuclear weapon. We're all on board with that.
Right.
But it doesn't look like we're going to get a much better guarantee than President Obama did, right?
Right.
And maybe we will, right? Maybe we will. So let's hope. But right now it doesn't look too good. The other one was a regime change, right? He said that we want to change regime. That people of Iran, this is your big chance. Don't let this chance go by. This is the best chance in a generation. Yada yada, and that ain't happening, right?
Nope,
the IRGC is not going anywhere. You can lop off as many heads as you want. There's another 1,000 guys behind him, just like each one a bigger jerk than the previous one. So
it's Iran's version of the Hydra. They chopped off a couple of heads, 2 more sprung up in its place. Yeah,
we got a whole basket of heads, right?
Yep.
Coming for you. And then the third one was to gain control of oil and making sure that we have permanent access. And we seem to have screwed that up completely, right? We're in a much worse position. And John, one thing that we don't talk about very much, but maybe we should, is that in the future, let's be honest, the Iranians have learned that they're at a technological disadvantage in every way that you can be, right? Cost basis of extracting oil and processing it, having to ship it, and 20th century technology, a technological deficit in war. Their economy is nowhere near what it should be on a per capita basis, and their population is a quarter the size of ours. So they don't have, the tax basis to support a huge military. Their military has been diminished. Okay, given all of that, they have still nonetheless learned that they can shut down the Strait of Hormuz whenever they want to, because that requires technology that's a combination of 100 years old, throwing mines in the water, and then drones. And it turns out that drone technology is so ubiquitous, right? It's basically a cell phone and a radio controlled airplane. Yeah, it's one step up from when we were kids.
Right.
And the technology is so ubiquitous that it doesn't cost that much to produce these things. And through the combination of those two things, they can shut down the strait whenever they want.
Well, yeah, they've certainly shown that you don't have to crush an enemy to make them feel the pain of war. And
Well
to
said.
and to that extent, they've been incredibly successful. I've said for the last month or so, no matter how this war resolves itself, Iran has won. I don't care
Yeah.
what we extract out of them. They've won because they've proven they can go toe to toe with the world's superpower and essentially wait us out.
And to your point, let me jump in here, because your point is exactly on target. Not only have they demonstrated that, but they've demonstrated it from the point of view of their regime in particular. It's not just our nation and our people, but our regime can go toe to. You killed a few of us, but we're still in. The same regime is still in power.
Right.
And before the war started, we killed dozens of thousands of our own people. And then you came in and killed thousands more of our own people. And you killed leadership, including the Grand Poobah. And we don't care about any of that.
Right.
They have established enormous credibility in terms of being jerks, right? And from the American point of view, it's hard for us. I think it's hard for a lot of them. I hope it's hard for a lot of Americans to relate to what this regime is willing to do, right? When we hear about regimes in the Middle East or anywhere else that are willing to execute their own people, kill their own people, gas their own people, right? We almost don't believe it. Like, we have to see 5 different news sources before we believe it, right? And when someone threatens that that's going to happen in the future, we're like, I doubt it. If we put enough pressure on them, they'll crack. They have established credibility beyond impeachment.
Right.
And that gives, to your point, that gives them enormous leverage in the future.
Agreed. And this is why it's kind of stunning to me that if you're in America, you can claim any sort of victory at this point. Because even if we take the president's confidence and take him at his word, what he's been willing to tell us so far about this agreement, that the Strait of Hormuz is open. Okay, it was open beforehand. It was reliable before you started this war. So you haven't moved the needle on that front, right? You haven't gained anything on that front. You were sort of chirping about regime change, to your point. The Revolutionary Guard is still in charge over there. Maybe you killed, unless your goal was to kill the old man. Okay.
Who was already an old man.
Like, literally, what was he, 89 when they got him? It was like, so to your point, it's like, what was this war about? I think even the most diehard supporter of President Trump has to sit back and scratch their head and say, was it worth what I'm paying at the pump? Is it worth the inflation? Is it worth the billions that we spent?
And even if you were to give the president the benefit of the doubt in terms of objective, I think a lot of his objectives made really good sense. We all wanted Iran not to have a nuclear weapon in the future. We all wanted to make sure we had control of oil in the future. We all would have loved to have seen the regime go away. But he didn't listen to his intelligence community. He didn't listen to bipartisan advisors. He didn't look at history. He thought Obama was an idiot, which was from time to time true, I suppose. But he thought that, surely anyone of normal intelligence could have gotten a better deal than Obama had gotten. It turns out that's hard. So I think it's a matter of a lot of execution. But building on what you just said, that is why there is so much pressure on Netanyahu to keep up the fight. Because to stop is absent the logic that would be necessary to convince Israeli hardliners, right wingers, war hawks to not want to keep going, right? The logic isn't there, to your point. You just outlined all the reasons why we have not accomplished anything that should suggest Israel should stand down. I mean, personally, I think the Israeli foreign policy is way too aggressive and they should be standing down anyway. But if you were on board with invading Lebanon, the deal that the president cutting wouldn't talk you out of it, right?
Right, right. And I want see. It's great that you brought up that point because I think that's a perfect segue, not just to move forward in this episode, but tie us back to last week's episode, where for those that missed last week's episode, and shame on you for doing so, we talked about the future of the U.S.-Israeli relationship and the political tensions, as you mentioned at the top of the show, in both countries, both the U.S. and Israel. The growing movement that, like, why are our policies so tied together? Why are our interests so interwoven? And we see that the president is a staunch defender of the U.S.-Israeli relationship.
Up until now.
Well, that was going to be
as of Tuesday night.
Well, that's going to be my question for you, because I think, and obviously, let me hear your full answer. Because up until now, the president, while he may have quibbled with an action or two, he's been willing to go to war with his own party. Thomas Massie being the most obvious example of when someone said, "Hey, I question this U.S.-Israeli relationship. Why are we sending them all this money? Why?" Again, we say it a lot, but
he turned on his own vice president 5.5 years ago, over something that wasn't even true. Okay. So you think he won't turn on a foreign prime minister over something that is true? I think I get why Netanyahu sucks up to him so blatantly. Wears the same suit and the same tie when he meets with him, because he's got some serious ass kissing to do.
Right.
Because he's not going to be able to follow every nuance of this deal that Trump wants him to follow. There's just too much political pressure on Netanyahu. So that guy's got to figure out how to stay on Trump's good side while not staying on his good side.
So here's what I want to put to you. Is this the beginning of the end?
Yes.
Okay. But let's be specific about your yes.
Yes.
Are you saying the U.S.-Israeli relationship is done, or that it's morphing to something else?
It's morphing to something else. It's going to be more like our relationship with Spain.
Mm-hmm. You're going to have to explain that for me.
Spain is a NATO ally that doesn't do enough spending that we want them to do, and so we get mad at them from time to time. In other words, it's more of a normal relationship, right? One could pick France, but that's so complicated. But I think it's going to be eventually, I don't know what I mean by eventually, a decade? In a decade, our relationship with Israel is going to be more like it is with so many other allies, but not so special. Right now, as most folks know, our relationship with Israel is not just special in the context of the Middle East, but special in the context of the rest of the world. We're very fond of talking about how special our relationship is with the UK, even to the point of sharing intelligence back and forth as though MI6 and the CIA were, down the hall office from each other, which electronically speaking, they might as well be at this point.
Right.
Well, at the moment, the intelligence appropriations bill in the Senate, which is under consideration, carries with it what they call Section 622, which would call for a sharing of intelligence between the Israeli government and the American government that is statutorily codified, thereby requiring any future administration to go to Congress and explain why he wants to terminate it. Think about that. Congress, I actually find this not just a bad idea in terms of foreign policy, but unconstitutional. Congress is saying that as a matter of foreign policy, which is supposed to be under the control of the administration, whoever the administration is, under the control of the executive branch, Congress is saying that as a matter of policy, in law, not just like an expression of interest or one of these dopey resolutions on a Friday night, right? In law, we should be sharing information with the Israelis back and forth. And if a future president, 3 presidents from now, from the Green Party, who the hell knows is going to be president,
Right.
3, 4, 5, 6 cycles from now, if they want to change it, they would have to go to Congress and get some sort of a waiver.
Right.
Wow. The UK doesn't no other country has this statutory codification of foreign policy saying that we're supposed to be sharing information.
Right.
That's weird.
and that's in, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's in addition to money that gets allocated, we discussed it before, for 10-year periods,
yeah,
to ensure the technological and military advantage that we feel Israel should maintain in the region, right?
Yeah. And so I think, qualified military edge, it's called, in again, codified in statute. Congress has said that it shall be the policy of the United States, I'm paraphrasing, to consider in matters of arms sales to the Middle East, to our other allies, to Israel, and especially when considering arms sales to those who might not be friendly to Israel, we must take into consideration our long-term interest as a nation in maintaining Israel's quality advantage, a qualitative military edge. It's the policy of the United States to maintain that. Wow, that's interesting. These are the sorts of policies. By the way, I don't know that 622 is going to be enacted. I hope it doesn't.
Right.
QME, the qualitative military edge, a piece of it will expire, the financial piece of it. But as far as codification, there's no automatic sunset. I hope that these issues are brought to light by the debate that's going on right now. If President Trump ends up mad at Netanyahu, I think these things will come to light lickety-split.
And to that extent, I love the way you phrased it. If President Trump gets mad at Benjamin,
it does get personal, doesn't it?
Especially with President Trump. I mean,
that's what I mean.
We would never accuse him of being coldly detached from a situation, right? It's always personal with him, no matter what the situation is. Right now, he's kind of irked at Bibi because he's saying, I'm not leaving Lebanon. And I don't know if I want to cease hostilities. Like, I don't know if it's in the best interest of Israel, which, to the extent that what I think he's saying is correct, like, in the same manner that I don't think our foreign policy needs to be dictated by Israeli best interests, I don't think Israeli national interest should be defined by what the U.S. finds in its own.
That's exactly right. And hear me straight. I think Israeli foreign policy has been, in many cases, really screwed up. I would do almost everything differently than what they have done. Not everything, because I know they've been put into some really defensive postures. They've had to do everything they could to save themselves and whatever they had to do to get money and resources. I get all that, right? When you're being attacked by multiple countries, you get a pass in terms of humanitarian foreign policy. Totally, right? Totally. Right. We all get that. But they've done so many things overplaying their hand. They've done so many things wrong. But that is not an argument for having to kowtow to Washington. And I think that's basically what we're saying, is that we want these two foreign policies to be disentangled. And as an American, I'm particularly upset about frankly, the ethical problem of having our money appropriated from us. You know, taxation is theft. You know that, John, right?
I've heard that every so.
You've heard that. In the Libertarian Party, we used to have this saying, taxation is theft, right? The reason we used to say that is because taxation is theft.
Right.
Okay. That's why we used to say that. All right. There's an ethical problem when you're thieving from your own population. First of all, that's an ethical problem.
Correct.
But there's a compounded ethical problem when you're giving it to a different nation. Right? That's an ethical problem. And I think the American public is done with that. I think you saw it in terms of, you know, when Doge was running around, albeit slightly silly in many cases, they did highlight the extent to which the American people are done with this idea of foreign aid.
Right.
Most Americans did not want to hear, well, you know, Radio Free America does this, and when we give money for food over here, it does that, and it buys this goodwill. And, you know, the American people have had it up to here. And in broad brush strokes, I think that the ethical issues involved in anything but an America first foreign policy, whatever that might mean to you personally,
Right.
but those ethics have come home to roost. I think the American public no longer trusts politicians in Washington to make these ethical decisions with our money. And this is a big example of that.
And I'm interested in getting your perspective. Do you think it'll be literally the resolution of the U.S.-Iran conflict, war, whatever we're calling it? Do you think that specifically it'll be that sort of casts the die, Caesar's crossing the Rubicon, that sort of thing? It's like, is this the moment where it all changes going forward?
I think that there have been a lot of stepping stones up until this point, and there'll be big ones yet to come. And I think it's different stepping stones for different people, right? For a lot of Democrats, the fact that Netanyahu and Obama couldn't get along, that Netanyahu disrespected President Obama, I think for a lot of Democrats, that was a bit of a turning point. I think this deal that Trump is cutting could be a turning point. We'll see how it goes. But for a lot of folks, I think it could be a big, big turning point. And let's not forget that even if there aren't many turning points in the future, youngsters in the United States, you and I have talked about this in the past, the data show that youngsters in the United States, and by that I mean everyone under 40, has a very different outlook on the Israeli-American relationship than people over 50.
Yes, true.
Very, very different. You saw it in the Massey polling, Massey-related polling. You've seen it in other polls. So just the passage of time is going to lead to a very different political environment in the United States. It's going to be less conducive to such a chummy relationship with the Israeli government.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I'm not even convinced that the hostilities have truly ended. I think they've stopped for a while. I don't know. And look, hostilities could just as easily be triggered by Israel, and thereby putting President.
I would suggest likely.
And it's very likely, to your point. And then it's going to be interesting to see what President Trump does. Like, he could yell at Netanyahu all he wants behind closed doors, or even in public, as the president is wont to do, right? And say, I don't want him doing this, I don't want him doing that. But when Netanyahu does something to preserve his own political status in his own country, let's say he lobs a whole bunch of missiles Iran's way for the sake of art.
Yep.
Do you think that'll be the match that lights the fire? And by that,
one more stepping stone. One more.
Wow. So you're not even convinced that in this sort of environment would be enough to say, hey, that's it. We're going to rescind the money or whatever. You don't think it'll be something like that in this go round?
Well, that'll be a big step, but there are so many pieces of yarn to be unwound that you're not going to be able to unwind them all in a couple of years. I think this thing is going to take a decade to unwind. You've got to defeat stuff like Section 622, and you've got to remove stuff like the QME. You got to get rid of the foreign aid funding. You've got to shut down the advantageous access to arms. You got to change the relationship with the other Gulf states. You've got to get them to behave differently toward Gaza. You've got to get them to behave differently toward settlements. You've got to get them to behave differently toward Lebanon. There are so many pieces that when you say, well, what if that happens? That'll change well, it might change a lot, but it's not going to change everything. There's still going to be 100 million people in the United States that are with Israel, ride or die.
And I guess that's what I'm asking as well. Like, for example, if I were to come to you and let's say we're setting up our own prediction market, right?
Yep.
How do the U.S. Israel odds of keeping the relationship as is, are they more or less favorable, say, with a Democratic Congress? Say the worst happens for President Trump and the
Yep.
Republicans lose the Senate and the House. Is that better or worse for the current U.S.-Israeli relationship?
A Democratic House?
Yeah, and the Senate. Let's assume both
If
chambers.
they take both. If President Trump sticks with Netanyahu, a Democratic Congress would be a disaster for Israel.
Mm.
On the other hand, if the Congress hates Trump and Trump hates Netanyahu, that could go differently because in the United States, we've seen how politics works. The enemy of my enemy is maybe not my friend, but I'm not going after him hard. It's just different now.
Yeah, see, this is a political quandary for me domestically, right?
Yeah.
Because let's assume against the current odds, President Trump and Trump-allied politicians retain the House and the Senate, even by the slimmest of margins.
Yep.
I'm not convinced that MAGA is necessarily pro-Israel to the point where the relationship gets totally smoothed over either.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree. I just think it's going to take some time.
Mm.
For the average age in the Senate is probably in the 60s in the Republican caucus. So you got some aging out to do there, and you got some aging out to do in the House of Representatives, and you need some turnover. And then you got to see where the next administration goes. The other wild card that we haven't talked about is that Bibi Netanyahu is no spring chicken. He's under indictment. He's facing an election.
Right.
He's got all these cost problems at home, and that's a country sick of war.
Right.
Right. So not only, and by the way, he barely won his last election. That went to runoffs, remember, in like 5 elections or something, runoff after runoff after runoff. So he loses power. His party gets thrown out of power. Whoever comes to power next, maybe a little bit less pro-America, maybe a little bit more pro-independent. I don't know. I'm just saying that it's a wild card.
Right. Right.
So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. I think, as Churchill would say, this is the beginning of the end, but this is not the end. Now, when he said it was the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. And I think that we're past the end of the beginning. Yeah, I think that Obama was the end of the beginning. It was no longer the case that every president of the United States just felt like he had to kiss the ass of the Israeli prime minister. We all wish that Nixon and Kissinger had the guts to say, no, when we say no settlements, we actually mean it, right? Yeah. Read my lips, no new settlements. That's what we wish that they had said, because that's what they thought behind closed doors. Kissinger and Nixon thought the settlements were unethical and a problem in terms of foreign policy and undermined the goodwill of the American public, but they didn't have the guts to go after them. And I think that we were still in the throes of the beginning of the expansion of the relationship. And I think we're beyond the end of the beginning. We're into the beginning of the end, but this is not the end.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting, I was going to say next couple of months, but probably like say the next couple of years. But I think to your point, I think it's inescapable the direction this is headed. I think to your point, the most staunch pro-Israel faction in either major party is aging out. To your point,
And they will fall off of the Israeli support tree for different reasons, possibly.
mm,
Certain folks may just not like war. Certain folks may just be sick of Netanyahu. Certain folks may be sick of fill in the blank. There may be different reasons. And that's another reason why these things take time.
interesting. All right, Mike, I've certainly talked myself out a little bit. Is there anything else you want to add? I know this was a subject that you have great interest in. So is there anything else you want to add on the state, either of the U.S.-Iran war or the U.S.-Israeli
I
relations?
think it's a real shame, just to summarize, I think it's a real shame that we are where we are, that these things are so hard that it feels like we need to learn by doing. And I don't want us to forget the stakes. You know, thousands and thousands of lives have been lost in prosecuting this war in Iran.
Mm.
Dozens of thousands at the hands of the Iranian regime before the war even started. We can't forget the thousands of lives that have been lost in the conflict just between Israel and Hezbollah. Don't even get us started on Gaza, about which we speak so infrequently now. You have 2 million people in Gaza, nearly all of which are displaced, dozens of thousands of deaths, right? On the edge of a nutrition crisis. Think about that.
Right.
The edge of a nutrition crisis. If you're occupying, the Israelis call it an embargo, if you're dominating another population and they're facing a nutrition crisis, that's on your hands. And I get the defensive posture. I get the reasons. I get the prosecution of the war. I get October 6th. I understand, right? I'm not trying to be dense here. But that is a responsibility that we must not allow to become escapable. And that's just one more reason why our foreign policies need to be disentangled so that we can express ourselves freely when necessary. We'll still be friends, we'll still be allies, but as they say, true friends speak to each other frankly as necessary. And that's the kind of relationship that I believe that we need to get to.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's a good way to sort of wrap up the episode. Mike, I wonder if you have anything you want to tell us about. Is there something you'd like to remind us of?
No. Thank you for asking. No, not at all. We're going to FreedomFest. We're making a major announcement on July 9. We're announcing a national campaign, a national Republican campaign that is, mark my words, unprecedented in 250 years of American political history. No one's ever done this. That doesn't per se make it a good idea. It doesn't per se make it a bad idea. But I think a whole lot of folks, when they hear it, are going to start picking sides. I think a lot of people will hear the idea and they'll say, that's really stupid. And then a lot of other people are going to say,
Things that make you go, right? Yeah. All right. And for folks who want to go to Freedom Fest, be there live in person, not just to hear about Mike's great announcement, but also to soak in the Liberty environment there, Mike. Maybe
a great event. And if you go to MikeTremont.com, you can see the code. There's a code, Mike Tremont 100. I almost forgot what it is.
Yep.
Mike Tremont 100. You got to spell it right. Mike Tremont 100. That's the registration code. Gets you $100 off at Freedom Fest. Freedom Fest, a lot of fun. Even if I weren't going to be there, even if we weren't going to have an announcement, it's a great event. I have missed this event in the past once or twice. I haven't made them all. And even when I'm not there, it's a great event. And I wind up jealous and wish I had been there. So I encourage everyone to go.
Agreed, everyone. Go to MikeTremont.com. You'll find the promo code MikeTremont100. It's there on the screen for you. Go ahead and avail yourselves of that. Besides, what better way to celebrate liberty than do whatever pops into your fevered imagination in Sin City, Las Vegas. Sounds like the perfect recipe for a great weekend of fun. Until then, hey, everybody, please smash that like button, hit the subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Leave a comment. Believe it or not, Mike answers all this stuff himself. I've tried to tell him not to, but he insists on replying to everybody's comments on YouTube, X, on Facebook, everywhere you find Mike's stuff. Definitely leave your comment. You'll get a response from the man himself. All right, everyone, until next time, this has been Big John. For my friend and co-host, Mr. Mike Tamat. Check us out on the next Liberty Lens. Peace, everyone.